You're listening to the PropTech Pioneers podcast. This podcast brings startups and MLSs closer together by exploring the beauty and the struggle of real estate data and technology. I believe real estate is on the cusp of a major transformation driven by better access to data, a new crop of pragmatic founders, and pent-up frustration with the status quo. These are conversations with those pioneers that are leading that transformation within the MLS landscape. I'm your host, Evan Knowles. I'm an entrepreneur building a fintech company called Simba that helps realtors manage their financial health using MLS data. And I wish I had access to these conversations earlier in my journey. So I thought I'd help future entrepreneurs and MLS executives learn from each other in a more open and accessible fashion. I hope you enjoy. Now let's jump into it. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the PropTech Pioneers podcast. Super excited for this episode. Been excited for this episode. This podcast is all about real estate data and the intersection of that with startups. And there's no bigger player, in that data space in general than CoreLogic. So many might know CoreLogic for the popular listing management platform that they own. That is, helping advance the industry and push the industry forward in so many different ways. But today's conversation is really going to be about how much more there is to CoreLogic when it comes to data and how they're using that data, building products with that data, and empowering other companies and startups to use that data to provide unique solutions to the market. So we've got John Rogers on to talk about that. So John, thanks for joining.
Fantastic to be with you, Evan. Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. Excited to dig into first your background, just so we can set the context of who you are and your position within CoreLogic and kind of what you oversee. And then let's dive into the meat of the discussion today. So start off with, quick background on yourself and then what you do at CoreLogic.
Yeah, I'm believe it or not, I'm an aerospace engineer by background, but I was terrible at flying planes, Evan. So I went into the technology industry, I was fortunate enough to work all across the world in different corners of the world in finance and retail and pharmaceuticals. Lucky to end up at CoreLogic, been here for nearly 10 years now, and run all of research and development for CoreLogic. So in simple terms, it's really going after, and sometimes we frame it as a Horizon 2 and a Horizon 3 initiatives, think about 18 to 36 months out, and really try and make it Horizon 1, as in it's in market and solving real problems for real clients. So, I'm in a fortunate position, Evan.
Yeah. Well, that's your background. Now, let's give some context for listeners that might not be as familiar with CoreLogic. So like I said, many in the industry that this podcast is geared towards are very familiar with your listing management products and some tools that you've built for agents and brokerages and other tools around data for the industry. But give us kind of the full picture of what CoreLogic is.
Absolutely happy to. So, as you mentioned, if you think about at its core, we are a property and location service provider. So what does that really mean? Well, we service over 1 million realtors in the obviously the real estate space, really to help them manage their day-to-day in terms of all the listings. Some people on the podcast might have heard of Matrix and One Home, and these are the platforms and all the data and all the insights that a realtor and a broker need to use to help you and I find a home. If you then move to the mortgage sector, we provide data, insights, and platforms to the complete origination process. So we touch about 8 out of every 10 loans across that core process. And similarly, in the servicing space, we touch a similar number for you and I to basically pay tax payments and look after our home. Then if we need to do loan modifications due to an event. If you think about the insurance space, we also provide platforms and data for the underwriting processes to get a home insurance and also the claims process. So with those three key areas, those three key markets, Because of that, we collect about 22,000 data sources, everything from a fax of a fax. Think of all the millions of documents that we procure and you and I sign when we buy a house, all the way through to point cloud data. In other words, 3D data. Think of satellite, aerial, drone imagery, and structure sense imagery, and everything in between. Because of that, that really underpins our fourth big area, which is data analytics. Think of all the insights that we can power. And obviously, we service our core markets, but also adjacent markets like oil and gas, telcos, retailers, and so forth. So it's a real diverse set of sectors that we serve, but that makes it even more exciting. So very fortunate to be in that position.
Yeah, super exciting, proposition to have that much data. And I'm sure the operations around, gathering that and making it valuable are really interesting. Give us kind of an idea of, how are you identifying data sources that are valuable to your customers and bringing about the execution to bring it into your network? Give us kind of that overarching operational lift of being a data broker and bringing all of this together, because I think that that's such an interesting value proposition.
No, great question. So, I mean, our chief data officer, Sachin Rajpal, and his entire enterprise data group really look after our 21st century data and analytics manufacturing plant. So everything from sourcing, procuring, standardizing, operating, governing, and then distribution, they look after that supply chain, literally like a retail, a manufacturer in the retail industry or a car manufacturer. It is to that level. The amount of automation and technology underpinning all that is jaw-dropping, to be honest. It's an amazing job that Sachin and his team have done. And in amongst all of that, obviously, we've got to be very secure and compliant. We're dealing with some sensitive data sets, and obviously with clients' own book of business. So that is absolutely core to our business. So it is a 24/7 operation, taking, again, just various tens of thousands of data sources, literally from paper documents all the way through to point cloud data, and everything in between. So it's a pretty amazing operation that Sachin and his team run there.
Yeah. No, I think the comparison to, an assembly line or manufacturing is really interesting, because that helps get the visual of, how many actual steps there are to actually turn that data into a product. Now,
That's right.
You guys aren't necessarily a public company, so it's not like we can go look up the data on, where your revenue is coming from, but give us just a sense of your most popular products. What are kind of your core competencies as a business that, are generating revenue for you?
Yeah, no, of course. So if I took those three core sectors, so real estate, mortgage, and insurance. So in the real estate market, as we mentioned, we have platforms like Matrix and One Home, which obviously service a lot of realtors, and our job is to make them a superstar in that transaction. If you think in the mortgage space, we provide insights on, if you think during the origination process, insights on the borrower, the collateral, and all the compliances. So in other words, verify the borrower, verify the collateral, make sure it's compliant, close the loan. In the servicing space, again, think of if you pay your property taxes through escrow, we touch 80% of all US mortgages across over 22,000 tax jurisdictions. So we are a payment processing machine. Think of like Stripe to you and I as consumers. We're similar in terms of how we're at the intersection of payment processing for property tax payments between the tax agency, the lender, and the consumer. So it's several $100 billion worth of payments go through that every year. So that's in the mortgage space. And in the insurance space, we have underwriting platforms and claims platforms, leveraging all of our data and insights, in particular, all of our spatial and reconstruction costs, which obviously underpin a lot of the underwriting decisions and the claims decisions as an insurer, sales policies, and also when an event happens, how do we get the homeowner back in the home as fast as possible? So that those are the key areas that we service. And then as we think of the fourth major business unit in terms of data analytics, it is literally such a wide-ranging set of insights from site location through to understanding behavior sets of homeowners for marketing ventures. It's an amazing breadth of solutions we provide. So and again, just if you think about it, it's if you add up all the residential properties in the United States, it equates to $43.5 trillion. So it's the biggest asset class in the world. So it's important that we get it right.
Yeah, and it's also really amazing how much change can be influenced from this data. It's so important, and it touches so many people's lives. Like you said there, the bedrock of the American economy is the homes, single family homes, and the ability to build equity in America. So it's very powerful, very important data. And how are you delivering, this value and this data? Do you guys have SaaS products that, are your own products that people are paying subscriptions for? Is a lot of your revenue from API calls and you're charging, transactional rates? Like give us an idea of what that service actually looks like when it's delivered.
Yes. And I guess simply put, a vast majority of it is SaaS solutions. So in the real estate world, in terms of things like Matrix, which supports the realtor and they're managing their listings, that's a SaaS platform. If I went to the insurance space, we're literally selling. If I'm an insurance underwriter, I'm using CoreLogic software and data to underwrite a policy. So again, very large subscription-based SaaS models. If you mention APIs, I think, and I might get it slightly wrong, but probably slightly, I think we do about 20 billion API calls per year. It's a massive undertaking because obviously, as well as providing pre-packaged solutions to the market, we can't build everything in the world, and we want to allow clients to come in and build their own listings portals, their own risk tool, and that's that they can leverage our data either via APIs, so obviously that's generally on a transaction basis, or they can get access to nationwide data sets, whether they want to come onto our data science platform or they want to leverage it in AWS or Google or Microsoft or Databricks or Snowflake, because it's really important for us to meet our clients in their world and try and take friction out of the system, so to speak. And apologies about the pun there, but just we're really passionate about taking friction out of the system.
Yeah, it's great to be so developer focused and just allow people to build by being agnostic to where that data might live. I love that. And I want to dive in here later in the podcast and how you're empowering companies and especially startups to build unique solutions like you just mentioned. Prior to that, again, one of the reasons I wanted to get on this podcast and I'm so excited about it is to paint the picture of how far reaching does property and location data go? Like how is it making a big impact in the world? And when we jumped on a call prior to this podcast, you painted a picture of several different scenarios that I thought were super powerful that I wanted to kind of go through and just let you riff and kind of share, that future vision of this data being used. And so one of the first ones was that I thought was super interesting because we're hearing so much about it these days, is climate impact and data usage and use cases around, how do we understand our impact on the environment via weather data, location data, and so many other sources of data. Talk to us about, how CoreLogic's being used to understand and execute, climate policy.
Sure. So we've built something called Climate Risk Analytics, which essentially allows companies to measure, model, and mitigate the impacts of climate change to every single property in the United States, indeed actually every single structure in the United States. There's over 175 million structures in the United States and counting. Um, just to give the listeners a bit of context, so unfortunately, with greenhouse emissions going up, the frequency and intensity of major weather events or perils is going up, and we're seeing that. And just to give you a bit of data around that, if you think since 1980, on average in the United States, there's been 8 major weather events per year that cause over $1 billion worth of damage. In the last 5 years, that figure's gone from 8 per year to 18 per year. So there is indications that it's having a major effect in terms of greenhouse emissions. What we've done is literally we've got 4 ingredients for climate risk. Think about all of our great property data, everything from first floor height to roof material to age of the home. Combine that with all of our financial information. So think about valuation models, reconstruction costs. Those are the background, the underpinnings of things called average annual loss and probable maximum loss, which is our financial indicators on risk for a certain house. And then you combine that with all our peril information. So your listeners might not be as aware that we build our own peril models, from tornadoes to winter storms to hurricanes to wildfires and so forth. Combine those 3 things with greenhouse emission models from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, which is part of the United Nations, which is basically models of greenhouse emission models over time. Combine those 4 things together, we run 300,000 years worth of scenarios per peril, per home, and that allows you to get basically a bell curve of here's your average, here's your probable maximum losses. So that financial metric, though, is key, because that once you put a financial measure on something, then the behavior sets of all the housing ecosystem, from federal governments to investors to lenders to insurers, that really helps drive all those groups to lean in and try and, one, protect home ownership, 2, protect the financial stability of the United States. So, Evan, hats off to Dr. Howard Botts, who runs our data science team. What they do is well beyond my expertise. It's running those 300,000 years worth of scenarios takes a lot of supercomputing. They dynamically downscale from the IPCC model, which is about 150 kilometers squared granularity in terms of resolution. They take that down to 1 to 3 meters, which takes a lot of supercomputer power. It's just pretty amazing. Obviously, we're working with some of the federal agencies pretty closely. One example, obviously, with the Federal Reserve Board, that they've just completed an exercise where, working with the top 6 banks, we've run the scenario that it's the year 2050, a major hurricane event has gone across the northeast region of the United States, and what are the financial implications and the risk profile to their books of business, which is obviously a good proportion of residential properties in the United States, and understanding the risk profile and some of the credit risk ratings that underpin it. So, we want to make a difference.
Yeah, super powerful stuff. I'm here in Kentucky, and a couple of years ago we had an anomaly of a tornado. And we've been getting more tornadoes. And I just watched a documentary not too long ago on Netflix how the warming of the Gulf of Mexico and that water is affecting hurricane season, one, but the tornado, where Tornado Alley is in the United States, and it's shifted more into Kentucky, and we had just a devastating tornado. And you mentioned on that first call that disaster recovery, of whether it's a hurricane or tornado event, and like you mentioned, events of peril. Talk about how data that you guys have can help with recovery and disaster relief. For instance, you mentioned floor plans, and that could help people on the ground prioritize what parts of the city they might need to go into first during a hurricane.
Yeah,
Talk a bit about that, because I thought that was
yeah,
super fascinating.
absolutely. So I'll just give you an example. If you recall, Hurricane Ian caused $40 billion worth more of damage. We were providing agencies, and I'm oversimplifying this because I'm sure the data science will kind of chuckle, but we were providing first floor height and material type of the first floor. And what that allows the agencies to do is really provide the batting order of which house to recover first, because obviously a pretty extensive area of land was affected, and that helps optimize logistics to recover homes and get the homeowner back in the home as fast as possible. So it's to even get the first floor height of every single structure in the United States is pretty amazing analytics and modeling, and how you use various data assets, images, understanding the elevation, obviously, understanding the exact points of the structure, the centroid, and how the ability to measure first floor height at scale and very accurate. So obviously that's a pretty major undertakings. But we want to provide this service and help owners after pretty terrifying events that can occur due to weather.
Yeah. And that leads into, and you mentioned it there, insurance and getting people back in their homes, using data to, assess risk and insurance, being able to, service areas. I think I heard, and I thought I heard that, parts of Florida insurance companies are exiting because of how frequent, these hurricanes are. And using data, I'm sure that, is either yours or others, that they're making assessments on their risk of underwriting, properties in Florida. And that's a material effect. That has a material
Yeah.
effect on a whole state if insurance companies are not moving in because of climate change. So that data, is super important for us to not just understand the effect of it, but are there ways that we can remedy it? So is that insurance example, are you seeing that? Is that true that insurance companies are considering not underwriting homes in Florida because of these recurring events?
Yeah, and unfortunately, yes. And we've seen a few insurance companies also in California just state that they're not underwriting new policies. I think there's a tension between the 1 year renewal of an insurance premium and the want for the housing ecosystem to look more longer term. And we're working with regulators at the federal and state level really to try and help ease that tension between those two business models, if you like. One's on an annual basis, and really, if you think about climate, it's longer term, really to get back to a place where the regulations are in place to ensure that the insurers can provide insurance to you and I as homeowners. So, we're definitely in the midst of things, and as a housing ecosystem and group, we definitely need to improve things here, because that's not a good sign
Yeah.
for homeowners to be in that position. But
Yeah, and
we
another,
definitely.
go ahead.
Sorry. No,
And
please
another
go.
thing that, along with that thought, in general, is affordability. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot about affordability and how are we going to make sure that, again, I said earlier, the bedrock of an American economy is people being able to buy homes and grow in equity. And majority of, the wealth in America is tied up in people's homes. So what does CoreLogic do on affordability front, and what products are leveraging to
Yeah,
help people afford homes, or to expose, where weaknesses are in the market so we can understand how to, build more affordability into it?
yeah, and affordability is a very complex and often nuanced and often localized and slightly different by area. Um, it, what we've decided to do at CoreLogic is try and focus on one part and move the needle. So, if to give you context, there's about 4.3, 4.4 million there's a 4.3 to 4.4 million housing shortage in the United States, and there is subsidies on the other side of the equation. But right now, it takes roughly double-digit months to several years to even do the feasibility and planning to sign off on affordable housing. So, what we're in the midst of running a series of pilots in several areas across the US, and really what it's trying to do is solve the conundrum of identify land to build a certain type of house for a certain median income, and solve the conundrum of providing a ROI back to the land and building developer. And on top of that, we create clean rooms, which is primarily the ability to bring in multiple groups and companies, everything from nonprofits, MLS groups, building developers, land developers, lenders, title companies, and so forth. And we can actually research together, running hundreds of different parameters, everything from type of house, type of material, to median incomes and so forth, and the types of subsidies being involved. And we literally run models and press a button, and it identifies types of houses you can build in certain parcels. What's the valuation? How does it compare in the market? What subsidies do we need? What's the ROI back to the land and building developer? So I appreciate it's certainly not a silver bullet, but again, if we can move the needle on that and actually get more throughput, and the theory would be is that we can start making a dent in that 4.3 million. But again, there's lots of different activities, tools, and mechanisms in a very complex issue right now. So, but yeah, we're deep in the weeds of this one right now, and pushing it very hard across the United States.
Yeah, definitely an issue that needs a lot of attention. And curious to how you all operate when it comes to identifying these problems and helping solve them. Are you CoreLogic saying, we know affordability is an issue, we know climate's an issue, let's start building products here and then take them to the market? Or does a DR Horton or a federal agency come to you and say, we want to support affordable housing? Then they come to you and say, help us. Which direction does it go? Does a lot of these problem solving come from CoreLogic or your customers? Is it a combination?
Yeah,
Give us an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination. I'll give you a real example with the affordable housing. We work very closely with the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association. We also work with lots of CDCs, which are really the non-profits and the quarterbacks of such housing development solutions. And I would also say what we bring to the party, because we have literally the truth data set on all things property. It's both historic right now, and we can build predictive models. That's a very powerful tool to bring to bear to some of these groups. So affordable housing, obviously, we've got experts in-house. Pete Carroll, who runs policy and all of our government relations, has, just take that one individual, amazing background, worked for the CFPB, worked for Wells Fargo, worked for Rocket Mortgage. That's a pretty broad spectrum, and that skill set and experience that he has, his expertise and just understanding how to connect the dots is pretty amazing. So I'm trying to give you an example. It's a combination of the two. Pete Carroll is really the brains and the sponsor, and we know how we're never going to solve this by ourselves. Then how do we use our network and relations to tackle these big problems? So it's definitely a combination of the two.
Yeah. And, like I mentioned earlier, I'm excited to talk about, how you empower companies via, APIs and developer focus, using this data to build products. You said something that was interesting on the call is that startups should come to you first. So let's talk about that. The developer ecosystem, I can learn out about that forever. And so talk to me why startups should go to you first, and then we'll dig into, how you support, the startup ecosystem and just innovation in general. So
Sure. Yeah, and I say this just from a perspective that, again, I've been fortunate enough to work across the world, across different sectors. And I think if I was doing a startup tomorrow, the expertise that you get at CoreLogic across a wide spectrum, everything from the realtor to the broker to the loan officer to the underwriter to the closer into mortgage-backed securities or the insurance agent, the insurance underwriter, the insurance adjuster. We work with all those personas day to day. So CoreLogic is in a very fortunate position that we understand the nuances of the housing economy and the ecosystem that underpins it. We understand the personas, the behavior sets, the drivers, the challenges, um, uh, what the how the network. I don't mean the technical network. I mean the network effect and who and the drivers between each of these groups. So if I'm a startup, I'd go to CoreLogic because I know I could tap into that expertise, and then on top of that, they have literally the truth data set and all things property and location. So and I know I've come across as biased, obviously, but right now, but this it's a that's a unique position to be in, that you actually see both real estate where you're trying to find a house. We see the buy area in terms of mortgage. We see the protect area in terms of insurance. We work with all the government agencies. We work with housing developers. That's a broad spectrum. So there's just so much expertise in CoreLogic. So in short, I would we can save PropTechs and RETECs a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, and you gave an example of a scenario that you ran into developing products was how sticky local network effects are. And you guys really understand local data and how that works. And I thought that was an interesting point that, it's really, you guys have seen such a breadth of scenarios. And you gave that example of, there's somebody trying to create a national, mortgage marketplace, and it didn't really pick up as much as you thought. And you guys had the data to understand, well, local network effects are extremely important to the real estate market. That was an interesting example I thought you gave, that many startup founders, I think, intuitively say, yeah, there needs to be a national marketplace of all of these lenders. We ran into issues there, and I thought that was a unique example
Yeah, no,
of a scenario.
and um, we've learned that in CoreLogic about obviously we want scale with our solution, but they have to be hyper personalized. Think of the real estate agent. You want to make sure that we make the relationship between the realtor and the homeowner, the home buyer, is even stronger, even better with the solutions that we provide. We don't want to put any pressure on that relationship. We want tight feedback loops, hyper personalized, hyper localized. Think of affordable housing, think about zoning information. So we want the ability to bring in zoning information, which can be of different formats, different data types, and be able to easily ingest that quickly within a matter of minutes, understand it, and integrate it within the solution. So that's an example of hyper personalized, hyper localized, which is very important. And sometimes, as a technologist, we think at scale and think everything must be the same and just roll out nationwide, which is sometimes a technologist's blind spot. So I've certainly learned those lessons.
Yeah, yeah, I have too, just recently. And uh, part of making very personalized, very catered products is having developers and product designers, uh, giving them access to the tools they need to tinker, play
Mm-hmm.
with, and understand data and use sandboxes. That was something I
Yep.
was excited to hear your perspective on how CoreLogic, handles developer
Yeah.
sandboxes.
Yeah. So we have, as you called it, a sandbox. We have something called our discovery platform, uh, where in one part of the discovery platform is literally for um, technical researchers, data engineers, data scientists. We can onboard you in a day. Well, to be honest, we can onboard you much faster than that, but just to um, get you onboarded, access to all of our nationwide data sets, our models. So think about property, mortgage information, lien information, spatial information, parcel information, HPI, which is a home price index, loads of different other models, and you have all the infrastructure compute, data science tools. Think of like, Jupyter notebooks, Python, and a whole range of databases and technologies to allow our clients to run research and develop models and insights in an expedient manner. And if they wish, they can collaborate with our data scientists and data engineers in a secure, compliant environment. But they hold the key and they hold the invite. That's really powerful. Everything from helping a Series B company get funding for Series C to running new loan modification models for a lender, to understanding risky CBSAs for another lender, to site location. It's a really good test bed to run analytics. Now, obviously, to do that at speed is key, and we try and take the pain away from infrastructure needing set up in a compliant and secure way. How do you match all this data together? Well, we have a simple clip service. So clip is our CoreLogic identifier. So you're allowed to, you can just call it, clips all your portfolio, your data assets that you bring in. That takes a minute or so, and then suddenly you can get to work. And if you have any questions, you can collaborate in a space with the data scientists. And the data scientists, obviously from CoreLogic, are tenured from 5 to 20, 25 years, so understand markets, understand modeling, understand the technologies out there, and we can get to an answer fast. So we've had about 150 plus clients come through this platform. So we launched it last year, and now we're building on top of that, and it's interoperable with all the different clouds in terms of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Snowflake, Databricks, so that when you have the model ready, you can push it out to where the operational platforms are for that client, whether it's a listing portal or a risk management tool, so they can consume it in an expedient manner. So, just fantastic to work with clients. So, again,
very that's fortunate. Exciting. And I know you're not supposed to pick favorites, but you mentioned about 150 clients that came through there. Is there a company in particular that CoreLogic really maybe is celebrated and used as a case study on that platform that you can talk about?
There's I won't mention names, but there's one where we helped. I think I mentioned it previously. Just a Series B prop tech company, and they got a good round C funding, and that was because of all the analysis we did to help them on their commercial model that underpins their entire business, and they secured Series C funding, and their board was very positive about the analysis that they had done. But our job was to support the client to get the Series C funding. So, that's fantastic. I mean, that's especially in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, where I think, if I remember correctly, I think the VC funding has dropped by about 75% year on year. So it's a very tough market, and hopefully it picks back up in 2024, and all indicators are saying that it should do that. So I think that one is the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, love that. And I always like to end on a forward-looking, exciting statement about the future. Your take on what's coming to the future of property data. So give us your take on what keeps you up and gets you excited about the space that you play in.
Yeah. So and it might come across as an obvious answer, but obviously everything to do with generative AI. It's an amazing capability. It's a next word generator, but obviously very sophisticated, and we've got lots of things in the oven, so to speak, and how we're leveraging it for both solutions to our clients and how we become more productive. I just think it's one of those things that we have to embrace. I know there's I know there's challenges with it as well. It's actually interesting thing about Gen AI. It really shines a strong light on the old adage of garbage in, garbage out. Really does.
Yeah.
And I apologize if you listen, if I've heard this one before, but just I was at a recent event and a journalist asked one of the tools, about his life, and it told him three things that had never occurred: that he wrote a book, that he never did, he wrote a contentious article that he never did, and much to his surprise, he had passed away in 2017. So, although humorous, it does show you that if it's not used wisely, it can really lead to really poor results. So, we're spending a lot of time in terms of governance and how to use this at scale in a wise manner. But it is a absolutely amazing technology. So as you can imagine, we're looking at it right across the board from real estate all the way into insurance. So yeah, I mean, it will transform the way we do business.
Have you had to change business models to take into account that new reality? Reddit, Twitter, now X, many companies have had to reevaluate how they share data, even their business models, because of generative AI, because of agents scraping the internet and ingesting that data and feeding it into, the foundation models. Have you had to run into any situations where maybe some data policies and models, business models have had to change because of this new reality?
That's an interesting question. I would actually argue it actually supports getting to the best data set. So sometimes I use a phrase of CoreLogic provides the truth data set for property and location. And I actually just think that it actually reinforces that, because if I'm like, our job as CoreLogic is to help our clients like yourself, Evan, make better decisions. And to make better decisions, you definitely have to have the best data. And so I would say that the 21st century data manufacturing plant, which will also have Gen AI in it, is going to utilize the same framework and governance that we have, because it's key, because our clients are making financial decisions, and that's I think it actually reinforces a lot of what we're doing. So I don't know if you think differently to that, but that's my initial reaction.
Yeah, no, I think being a data aggregator and a data analysis company, prime position, because these LLMs and the generative models themselves, they need to ingest data. That's one of the, I think, things people are looking into the future and saying, if we've already ingested the internet's data, where are we going to get new proprietary data? And I think one of the interesting things about the property industry is that there's always new data coming online, and you've got to have that source of truth to plug in and make sure that there's also a historical context, but also keep it up to date. And so I agree. I think CoreLogic's in a very prime position when it comes to generative AI and generating proprietary data, but also brokering data so that somebody can go to just one company to ingest that data to feed into their models versus do that work to go to so many different sources. I think you guys are in a great position.
100% agree. I think sometimes companies, and I've been in the same position, is that we go into a space where it's actually a few steps removed from the core product that we're actually trying to sell to our market. If I'm talking from a client's position, so let other companies deal with infrastructure, data aggregation, cleansing, and focus on the product. I think that's a great point you're making. I think, and I've been in that boat before. We try and solve everything sometimes, and some things are not core to the business that company might be running. So, totally agree with you.
Right. Well, I'm kind of tinkering. I'm having a lot of fun playing with these generative AI models, and it's amazing how great of a developer ecosystem there is. You can just go play with OpenAI's GPT-4 model for hardly any cost, and it's the most powerful technology we've arguably ever created. And I can just go get an API key and play with it. It's an amazing time to be building products.
Oh, 1000%. And I think everyone should embrace it and just think about how do you ensure the quality, how do you operationalize it, and obviously how do you secure it. Think of generating a listing. There's certain compliant language you have to have in a listing. So you've got to think it through to make sure it's compliant, as well as just, I can generate a listing really fast off some images as an example. So it's again, definitely agree, embrace it, and just how to operationalize it is something that I think we all need to think through and make sure we can scale with it. So but very exciting.
That piece makes me think about this concept of human in the loop. I think our brains and the ecosystem of innovation and technology is so quick to jump to being replaced by AI. And I think there's going to be this really long middle ground where we take data from CoreLogic, we take an LLM, we combine them, build workflows that involve humans, authenticating, confirming, playing with data, taking out bias manually and retraining these models. So there's this concept that I think is going to be the next generation of SaaS tools and products being built on top of these LLMs, which is this concept of human in the loop. And I think that you just described it perfectly, where we've got to build an environment where we confirm this data and make sure that we can analyze it and make sure it's accurate and unbiased. And that's going to involve collaborating between these models with humans. And so we have to build solutions that bring the two together.
Yep, and I 100% agree. And at the very, very end of the day, and I'm oversimplifying, I appreciate that, but it's a next word generator.
Yeah, it's just predicting. It's literally just using math to predict the next word.
Yeah, so and that doesn't mean it can think.
Yeah. So we've got to augment it with our own ability as humans to have cognition and think. Yeah, you're
exactly right.
But it's also really interesting that when you think about how our brains actually work, we're doing the same thing when it comes to language.
Yeah, true.
It's as we build these artificial intelligence models and new technologies, I like to frame it as we're actually just studying our own brains. Because you said, like, we're just filling in, sentences. We're just predicting what that next word is. But our brain is doing that all the time. When we start a sentence, we actually don't know how it's going to end. We just fill it in as we go. So it's kind of scary. While you say that, our brains do the same thing.
Yeah. I think obviously with us thinking, we take in a lot of contextual parameters. Yes, I agree, and it's not going to replace people. It's an augment to what we do each day, and that's the exciting part. It really is an augmentation to what, whether you're in selling homes or you're in the marketing division or you run HR, it can help literally everything. So it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Oh, well, the insights have been amazing. I've enjoyed the conversation. This whole podcast is all about property data, mixing with startups, the MLS landscape, and you've touched on so many exciting things that are coming, but also here today that CoreLogic's doing. So thank you for your all's work, and thank you for taking the time to share these insights with our audience.
Evan, it was fantastic to catch up with you. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.